I'm Nick Terzo, and you are listening to The Radical. Something a little different this week, current affairs. My guest this week has been monitoring the Britney Spears conservatorship for well over a decade. Some say he is the originator of the Free Britney campaign. His pop music fan site, which was started as a teen, now regularly gets 1 million views per month. Joining me is BreatheHeavy.com founder Jordan Miller to discuss all things Britney. We will break down the narrative of this story, including the politics and the players in this case, how a judicial system can treat an adult this unfairly, and Jordan's longtime advocacy for Britney's release from this conservatorship. We also touch on the undue pressures Jordan has felt personally from many people, including Britney's father, Jamie Spears. Coming up, my conversation with Jordan Miller. Hello, Jordan. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful and excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you, and I know it's your busy season. But I do want to talk a little bit about your background and your history. And I mean, you've certainly understand the social media game at a very extensive level. And you've had this website that when I first met you at our friend John and Milo's home, I was like, who's this kid? And immediately we got into your I can remember sitting at the kitchen table and you taking me through BreatheHeavy. And I was like, wow, this is like really impressive. He's so young and he did this. And this was, maybe 10 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the idea of launching a fan site, the work that went into it and kind of building it into a real legitimate community.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it is an interesting perspective to be kind of taking a trip down memory lane, as I've been doing frequently lately because of everything going on with, the Free Britney movement. And it's really kind of forced me to look at my past in a way that I didn't anticipate doing, because I've documented this whole thing that Britney Spears is in. And I know we'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, it's been a very introspective summer for me. You mentioned it's busy season. It feels like it's just for the last 10 years since I've seen you, it's been one long busy season. I'm doing my best to take moments to pause and reflect and be present and also look ahead. But in terms of Breathe Heavy, and for those listening who have no idea who I am or what this even is, Breathe Heavy started out as a Britney Spears fan site in 2004. So I graduated, or I finished my sophomore year of high school at 15 years old. I had spent that whole year from 14 to 15 years old learning how to create a website, because, in 2004, there wasn't these drag and drop ways to build sites how there are now. Social media wasn't even a thing. And I wanted to have a Britney Spears fan site. And the rest is honestly history, because I never stopped writing about her and have continued to do so throughout my adolescence, all through my 20s. I'm now 33 years old, and it's become something in a lot of ways completely out of my hands, because Breathe Heavy is a full-fledged community where literally in the last 30 days, there's been more than 1 million people that have gone to Breathe Heavy. So that excludes social media. So it's become out of my hands, so to speak, because the community is the one that are really connecting one another. And it's my role to sort of, quote unquote, lead this community, to try to be a good example as a person, to try to set boundaries, because inherently, there's a lot of emotionally charged topics going on. So that's kind of it's a bird's eye view look at everything. I know there's a lot of information. I'm not sure quite what you think of that. Or
well, what do you let's hop back 17 years, right? Look, there's a lot of artists that I've loved in my life that I wouldn't go to the extent of building any kind of a fan site for them, no matter what I thought of them. So what was the real impetus for you to go to this level of engagement as a fan?
Well, this level of engagement has built upon itself for these last 17 years. So where I obviously, and as people change drastically in that time span, when you're 14 years old, 15 years old, that is like the stereotypical like height of this impassioned young teenager who's a fan of somebody's. And I have always had a lot of energy and had a lot of energy back then. I was in gymnastics 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. And even then I felt like I still had a lot of creative energy and wanted to somehow unknowingly channel that into a website. I just specifically remember wanting to create a website. I don't know why. I don't know where that came from, that drive. But it's something that's always been ingrained in me. And I'm very grateful that I kind of did that, because it's put me on this trajectory of where I am now. And I like where I am now, but it's been, these 17 years have been very up and down, as I'm sure everyone who's listening can relate to, looking back on that amount of time.
Right. And so I want to get to like your discipline part of this, because, as an athlete and stuff, you're extraordinarily disciplined. It's clear. But at that time, since it was kind of pre-social media, I mean, could what you did today happen, or could it not? Like,
that's a very interesting question. I'd like to say that it could happen, because I don't necessarily consider BreatheHeavy an anomaly. At the same time, BreatheHeavy is a rare breed. It is rare now at this point to see. BreatheHeavy also covers pop music as well, not just Britney Spears. But because of this the first 10 years was a Britney Spears fan site. On the 10th anniversary of BreatheHeavy, I made this announcement saying, we're going to also include pop music coverage. I got a lot of pushback about that, but I'm very happy with that decision still. I still stand by that, because although there's tons of Britney news, especially now, we can still openly talk about other pop music news related items, and it's not weird. And we can BreatheHeavy's been able to grow to be able to include more topics, which is great for any, business, any project. So, but it's still, especially now, it dominates with Britney news. And remind me, my ADD already kicked in. The discipline.
All I was saying is this thing was a pre-social media venture. I mean, in today's world where I'm a podcaster, we're all drowning in like a fire hose of content. I mean, do you think you could have built something like this independently?
Oh, yes.
Or not?
Yes, to answer that question. My initial thought was like, no, BreatheHeavy is not an anomaly. It could happen. It definitely happened again. But there have been so many things that had to have aligned for BreatheHeavy to be what it is now, especially with the situation that Britney is in, which is unprecedented in itself. So to have this kind of fan site stand the test of time through social media, and trust me, it's been extremely difficult. It's been hard, but I attribute my drive and unwavering dedication to wanting to push myself and push BreatheHeavy as why it's remained online for this long. Maybe in hindsight, maybe it's not possible to do this again. There were so many things that had to have happened. I think being around pre-social media, building such a loyal following over the years, who knows? I mean, I don't know, actually. That's a great question. I think with social media, it would make it a lot harder at this point, because if there's a fan site out there now, it's on Instagram, it's on Twitter. Those are where the fan site, quote unquote, fan sites exist at this point. It's not like a straight up website. So maybe it's not going to happen again. And if that's the case, I mean, that adds an even extra special sauce to BreatheHeavy's fabric of what it is.
Right. And you threw around some numbers earlier, and of course I wasn't fully focused. So like, what are some of the stats of the website? I mean, currently, I mean, what have you built it into as a community?
So there are just over 76,000 registered members currently. So 76,000 accounts that can post on Exhale. Exhale is the forum name of Breathe Heavy. Around 1 million people have gone to Breathe Heavy in the last month. So that obviously is because of the Free Britney movement, and it's a global movement at this point. So there's eyes around the world who are checking in. And on social media, the reach is even far more expansive. On Facebook, there's, I think the last time I checked, in the last 30 days, there was like 15 or 16 million people that had seen Breathe Heavy's posts on just Facebook. Instagram, there's 70,000 followers as of today. So I just crossed that threshold. And Twitter, there's about 50,000 followers. So
has that modified how you do things? I mean, like with the social media reach you now have? I mean, do you do certain things for social media that you don't do for the site? I mean, how do you feed it?
Yes, great question. And yes, I do. I treat Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Breathe Heavy as separate entities, so to speak, because what you can post on Twitter, I wouldn't post on Instagram, and I wouldn't post on Facebook because they're different audiences. They're on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook for a reason. So you kind of have to feed the content in the way that people want to consume it on those platforms. So Instagram is much more visually rich of a platform. So I don't encourage people to go, I rarely at this point say, click the link in bio, because I just feel like people don't want to do that on Instagram. They're like, no. And so what I've been doing is when I write a story, I just post the entire story on Instagram. You don't have to go anywhere. Just read it. I'm just trying to give content. And I found that to be actually really powerful because it gets people curious. Like, well, if he's posting this on Instagram, I want more of this. And they'll go on their own organically to breatheheavy.com. So that's kind of worked out. Twitter is more of like, I just shoot off kind of more rapid fire, fleeting thoughts that I have that aren't so formal.
Provocations.
Yeah. And Facebook, Facebook is an extremely powerful sharing tool. It is like, it kind of blows my mind. I mean, 15 or 16 million people in the last month have seen Breathe Heavy's content on Facebook. Like, that is a staggering number that I can't even wrap my head around. And unlike Twitter, you can share things pretty easily, but people don't like to share things so much. People don't like to retweet links, I've found personally on Twitter. They'll retweet like a thought, but if it's going to link to a story, people aren't super down to share that. Facebook, though, totally different animal. I'll have a story that will be shared thousands of times, and it could be this. I could post the same exact thing on Twitter, and it just does not get the same traction. So Facebook's an amazing tool to be able to share content. And then if I want to be my most authentic self, I'll do that on Breathe Heavy, because I'm going to get Facebook and Twitter are just like, and no offense to anyone who's listening who follows me on those platforms, not necessarily speaking about everyone, but those are the platforms I get the most toxicity from. I don't like just really terrible, awful things said about to me every single day. Instagram's a lot better about that. People on Instagram, I feel like, root for me, and they follow Breathe Heavy and they root for Breathe Heavy. And then Breathe Heavy, I rarely get any kind of hate, because they're there to support Breathe Heavy. They know who I am. They know that I built this platform, so that I don't really get people who register and then talk down to me.
Right.
So,
and we were talking about this a little earlier, because I expressed my concern, even having you here as a guest kind of during this time. I'm certainly not I'll be gentle.
Thank you.
So how do you, look, I don't think people understand that someone who would start a website that's based really on entertainment, I know there's a legal thing going on here and all that, but that you would be on the receiving end of kind of like toxic or abusive type of behavior. So, I mean, I think that might be surprising to some of my listeners.
Interesting. It's surprising to me to hear that that would be surprising to others, because I feel
I'm
like
old.
it's, well, I say that because it seems so ingrained in internet culture at this point that you're going to have a subsection of people that are just haters. It's like, it's unfortunate, but I do think that the internet works in this way where you need this hate in some way. I know that sounds weird, but like, it has to provide some contrast for all the great comments that people provide. You're never just going to have everyone love everything you do. Not everyone's going to love you. And even though in theory I get that, when I read negative comments of calling me a narcissistic sociopath is what I read today, or just whatever, it's like I could read 100 nice comments, and then that comment clearly, as I'm even bringing it up now, it's like, damn, like someone out there just straight up does not like me and wants to say something. They are saying this to try and hurt me. And it's when you start to see how your business grows, you're going to get more comments. And the business model of my business is engagement, is comments, is feedback. And so this summer, Breathe Heavy has grown so tremendously that I'm then receiving a larger volume of feedback than I've ever had, which means a percentage of that is negative. And at first, like, it's been difficult to kind of like, cope with that. It's like, well, damn, like, I'm just trying to do good. I'm just trying to be a good person. And people just totally don't see that. They just want to see what they want to see. And although I understand it's really ultimately a reflection of themselves, they don't like themselves and they're taking it out on me. I'm still a person. I still have feelings. It still hurts my feelings when someone talks down to me. I'm like, why don't they see me the way I want them to see me? You know? But it's the nature of the beast. And I'm working right now with a life coach to try to understand parts of that are hard for me to wrap my head around. And also from a broader view, just try to understand like who I am through all of this. Cause it's a really unique time for me right now.
Right. Has it been difficult? And I ask this a lot of like the musicians that are kind of on the show occasionally, because they have success at such an early age, like some in their teens or, early 20s. And then you're basically defined for your whole life. And then you're 60 and you're still that kind of.
Yeah.
Do you have some of that you're kind of dealing with today? Like, man, I'm kind of locked where I was 17 years ago as a teenager. It's become my career.
Yes. Yes, I can relate to that for sure. I am doing interviews for the most part exclusively because of Britney. So people aren't necessarily reaching out to me to talk about pop music. It's brought up, but I used to actually shy away from this whole aspect of like, I don't want to be defined as this. And I still don't want to be necessarily quote unquote defined and be, categorized or labeled, but everyone can relate to that in any area. Like no one wants to be labeled. I think this summer, hearing Britney's testimony, hearing her kind of confirm all of these things that I had been writing about for 13 years, basically unsure of how to proceed. Am I hurting her by speaking out? Am I invading her privacy? Like, how do I even know what I'm saying is the truth? For her to go on the record and basically confirm everything, that she is in an abusive situation, that these conservatorships are deteriorating her overall well-being. Now I look back, and even though I'm like in some way attached to the Free Britney in some sense, now I look at it, I'm very actually super proud of myself and super grateful to be a part of it. And if someone looks at me and I'm synonymous in a little way with the Free Britney movement, or even just Britney's public persona in some way, I look at that and I'm like, I'm very grateful for that. That's huge. I had a gut feeling when I was 19 and I relentlessly did not let it go. I was just very stubborn in my conviction about it. And I had a platform to speak and I chose to do so, even getting legal threats from her dad and just facing even in the last year, getting multiple cease and desist from her former business manager and other legal stuff going on behind the scenes that's made it scary. It's like, I'm very grateful to be a part of this. So my perspective has changed only within the last few months.
Right. And as a creator of this or a founder, was there a time, because you're shouldering a lot, you just mentioned a few things, which we'll get to down the road here, that you said, you know what, folding the tent, I've taken enough abuse. It's not worth it for me anymore. I've tried to do this community in a positive way. Did you ever cross that bridge? Or how many times have you crossed it?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I feel like anyone who is passionate about something, at some point, I think it's really healthy to question yourself and like, okay, Jordan, it's been 17 years that you've been doing this. Is this good for you? Hence why I'm working with the life coach to kind of understand, like, how do I feel about everything? This has been the reason why I keep bringing up this life coach thing is because recently there was a BuzzFeed article that came out, and in this BuzzFeed article, they talked to some psychologists, and long story short, they kind of painted me out they kind of like described me to be this almost like sycophant, like this crazy fan, where my identity is so ingrained in Free Britney that, you know, if Free Britney comes to an end because Britney finds autonomy, I don't even know what to do with myself. And that's basically how they painted me, which I don't agree with at all. But it is true in some sense. I am working with a life coach because I do find myself, a part of my identity is wrapped up with Breathe Heavy, not necessarily just Britney, but Breathe Heavy, but a little in some ways with Britney. And that's only natural. I've been writing about her for, you know, all these years. I think it's important to question yourself and like, should I proceed? Am I doing good? And what do I think about all of this? But to answer your question, like, have I ever wanted to throw in the towel? Like, yes, absolutely. And even this summer, I feel like this has been the hardest summer yet because there are other things going on with Breathe Heavy behind the scenes that I can't even legally get into yet that I look forward to sharing. But it has, and I'm beating a dead horse here with this life coach thing, but I sought out a life coach also to help me emotionally with some of this stuff, you know, to not just cave in and eat my, push my feelings down and not pretend everything's fine when it's not fine. Breathe Heavy has been really hard. People don't see that because they're there to go and post and connect with one another. And I have taken it upon myself to, like you said, shoulder some of these emotionally trying things because I want people to have a little bit of an escape for their own lives. I don't have that same luxury with Breathe Heavy. I have to kind of take some of this on in myself, and I want to keep it in because I don't want people to necessarily know all these things, but it's been kind of eating me up. So I'm kind of formulating a plan right now of how I can go about sharing certain aspects of Breathe Heavy and my business and things I've been wanting to share with people. I'm not alluding to anything. I know I'm being a little cryptic, but it's not like I'm not alluding to Breathe Heavy closing. Like Breathe Heavy, I'm ride or freaking die. And that's been the double-edged sword because I'll do anything for it, you know? And anything in life that you're willing to be so ride or die for is going to cause you some problems because if you don't want to let it go, it's going to create some resistance. And so I'm just navigating what that feels like for me right now.
Right. So that leads me to asking, let's talk about Jordan as a multidimensional human being.
All right.
How about that?
Yes.
I mean, you trained in your youth kind of as a gymnast. I mean, a competitive gymnast, right? Very competitive.
Yes.
Tell me a little about that.
Oh, I appreciate you asking. I trained 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. My coach, his name was Vitaly Sherbo. He, next to Simone Biles, it's like Simone Biles and then Vitaly Sherbo as like the most decorated gymnast of all time. So he was just very intense and instilled this kind of work ethic in me very early on. I had a lot of energy, like I said, but I just didn't know how to channel it. And growing up with him as my coach and, being a competitive gymnast, going to the Junior Olympic National Championship several times, just how difficult it is to train 18 hours a week as a child and throughout middle school and high school. it presented its own challenges of like, how do I do homework? How do I have friends? I mean, I'm
Mm.
still kind of in that same boat, even like, how do I do Breathe Heavy and have a social life? And, not to mention having a full-time job as well. So yes, but being an athlete, especially being a gymnast, I am so grateful for, especially now because of the drive it's taught me. But also I, as much as I can, try to compete in CrossFit now. And I train in CrossFit 5-6 times a week. And those workouts, as everyone knows, like are they're a lot. They're just they're designed to be very intense. I'm always on the floor at the end of the workout, just completely gassed, no energy left. And just being able to have had the knowledge to know how to push my body from as being a gymnast into CrossFit has been like life changing. And I have a lot of people always at CrossFit being like, oh, I wish I had a background like that, and it was definitely something I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. And what, in your earlier years, with the gymnastics, I mean, what made you kind of like pull away from that then and say, wait, this is all consuming. I just can't.
Mm, yeah, my personality is very much like where I will just go and go and go until I literally can't anymore. So in terms of gymnastics, it was like I was 18 years old. It's like either you're going to go to college for it or you're not. And I was so just emotionally, what's the word? Just like, I was exhausted. I was emotionally exhausted. I was physically beat up. I had injured my back. I had broken, like, just over the years, you break fingers, and like I broke my hand when I was younger. My ankles were messed up. Like I had a stress fracture in my back that I had to do physical therapy for. And I was just like, I'm exhausted. So I didn't just abruptly leave gymnastics at that point. I actually started coaching immediately. So I started coaching and I coached for a number of years, actually, which was in its own right and actually a even more profound experience as being a coach, I found, than being an athlete, because you're able to kind of instill your knowledge in somebody else and see them kind of spread their wings. So I was able to kind of transition it pretty quickly.
Yeah. What's the trigger in you that kind of finds these things that kind of take you, they consume so much in order to be successul. And you seem to keep bringing them on in your life, where it almost brings you down to, a kind of a little bit of a shell of a human by the time the experiment is run its course.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. I don't know if I'd quite put in those words, but
it's dramatic. I know.
Yeah, it's a little dramatic, but I do feel you. Like there is some truth to me and my personality being like this, like flame, and I don't know when to stop pouring gasoline on myself until I'm just like explode and there's nothing left. And this summer I did start to kind of feel burnt, like, not to use this analogy, but I was feeling burnt out. And that's where I've done a lot of soul searching but it is true. Like I have, for some reason, I have this drive in me that is relentless, and it's just like this horse I can't seem to tame. And I want to try to tame it, and I'm working on it. I think it'll always be like that. I think there'll never be a day where, in fact, I don't even want a day where this horse is tamed. Fuck that. I just want to be able to learn how to like live with this, and like learn how to be able to be a little more calm and present in the moment. Not to get too deep, but like one way of doing that is just to be completely sober, like sans alcohol or anything, because as you can imagine, everything I do, I take to 110%, including all that. And I have had to learn the hard way many, many times over the years. And that's a part of me that is very scary. I shy away from it. Me even talking about it right now is me trying to grow and trying to be more vulnerable with people in an effort to kind of quote unquote tame this like just intensity about me. So I'm not quite sure what that means for me moving forward, but I don't know. To anyone who's listening, I'm sure you can relate to like trying just to discover like who you are and like how you can grow and how you can better. And I'm just trying to take action and find some sense of self. And I'm on my way.
There you go. That's good to hear. So, and as someone who's been, I've been pretty much sober for, I don't know, 33 years or something. So as long as you've been on the earth,
oh, wow.
I suppose. So, but it just gives you, and there was no real issue with it for me. I mean, it just gives me such clarity though, and like opens up like this whole, I don't know how to say it. It just, I think the other things just clutter. It just, I feel like I'm so much more on an open road, and it's fantastic. So
100% understand that. To be able to, I went out with some friends last night briefly. I rarely go out because I do actually have a struggle with a little social anxiety as well, which is also something I'm trying to intentionally put myself into social settings to be able to like, be like, you're fine. Take a deep breath. I know it's an interesting time with COVID and everything going on to like be doing this kind of thing, but just, I was trying to be as safe as possible. I'm vaccinated, by the way, to everyone who's listening. And, but yeah, I think being not drinking is a way that I personally use to be like, all right, I can kind of relax in a social setting, but taking that away, it's like, I have to use my thoughts and go into a night like with a plan. And so, I do that in all areas, but this has been an area that has been the most challenging because I think gay culture, there's just an unspoken fabric part of it that's like, there's drinking and there could be drugs, and it's just part of this, and not all parts, but it's there. It's definitely there. And I want to be around people. I want to meet people. How do I do that and also not necessarily be around all of the kind of hecticness that kind of gay culture can bring sometimes? And that's not to say there aren't barbecues and events and gatherings that are not everyone's fucked up. There's plenty of other things, but I do think it's part of this culture that I'm in. So I don't know. It's probably more than you bargained for.
As being in Vegas, does that make it a little more difficult? I mean, it certainly has a reputation. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, I haven't lived anywhere else, so it's hard for me to have a different perspective, but like, I'm sure someone who's living, not in what's considered to be like a party capital, it might be a little bit easier, but to be honest, actually, now that I say that, I actually don't agree with that. I think you make your surroundings. It's up to you. So like me saying like Vegas is a party place, no, ultimately it's up to me. And yes, Vegas is very sexy, and there's a lot more. I think there's a lot of potential for things to go awry, but ultimately you could be in anywhere and you could still implode. So.
Oh boy. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm glad you did that. So,
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Because we're all about keeping your, and all of our, mental health and well-being during COVID alone, let alone kind of some of the stuff you're dealing with the online world, which I guess when you do podcasts, you have less of that issue. So at least
you say so that far, now.
So far.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Here they come. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the conservatorship. I really knew nothing about Britney Spears. I didn't listen to the music. Certainly when the documentary came out in February, which I have not seen. I mean, are you even in it? I've never asked that.
No, I actually did a couple of pre-interviews for it. And for one reason or another, they didn't want to include me. I don't know why. It actually really hurt my feelings at first, because I felt like my ego kind of was like, took a little bit of a beating. Like, why would they want to include me? But that was just a very selfish stance. Like, the documentary is profoundly great. And to all the, Britney fans who were able to contribute to it, very grateful for them. And there's other opportunities for me on the way. So I didn't make this particular, project, but that's okay.
Right. Well, I didn't see it. So, but what it did do for me is all the reporting around it. I got sucked into it because of the fairness issue and the total absurdity of what's happening to this woman. And
Yeah.
having been around artists, all my life, musicians who are self-destructive, having put them through rehabs and kind of been around that world a little bit, I was kind of shocked to the extent of this conservatorship. I mean, it's just mind-boggling that any adult would be in this situation, especially when they still are expected, and she still does, perform, earn money, function for a lot of people. I mean, the whole cottage industry that she supports. So let's get into this a little bit. Let's talk about, I don't want to get, there's a lot of players here, so I guess I don't want to get too mundane, but
sure.
Let's start where this started with the LA County judge. What's her name? Reva Goetz?
Reva Goetz.
Yeah, Reva. And so this was in 2009. Is this when it began?
2008.
Okay. So, and we're going to say go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, you asking these questions leading up to this right now.
Is this dangerous for you?
What do you
legally?
Mean? Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I appreciate you asking that. No. I think these questions that you're asking, like, how could this be happening? These are all the things that I was asking 13 years ago publicly. And for many years felt like I was speaking into the wind, because people who I would talk to about this are like, how this doesn't make any sense. You can't just do this to somebody. There obviously has to be something going on behind the scenes with Britney medically that the court would agree to this. And I was like, and so I felt very gaslit for basically for 12, 13 years. And so it starts in 2008. She is put into this conservatorship behind her back. Normally conservatees, so in this instance, Britney, very usually are meant to be notified that this is happening.
Don't they have to be interviewed actually before this decision can be made?
Correct. There's supposed to be a process where the conservatee has the opportunity to contest it. Now, what's interesting about that is usually a conservatee is not in any sort of place mentally to be able to make that rational kind of decision making. So what they did, seemingly, is they claimed she had dementia, and a judge signed off on that. Now, it's very interesting to me that someone with dementia could go on a world tour a few months later and record an album and raise her children. And so these were the things that I was saying right off the bat, year one.
I mean, it decided over a weekend, right? Or something crazy
Correct.
Like that?
It was days. Yeah. It was planned. It was like, we're doing this. It wasn't just like, it wasn't like a spur of the moment thing. It was like, we need to get her in this, and I can understand that her 2006, 2007, like we all saw her kind of like life splashed before our very eyes. I understand there needed to be change. I don't think stripping someone of their civil liberties was the way to go about it. So I can agree that change needed to have taken place in her life, but not in this capacity. So she's placed in a conservatorship. Britney, does her best to try to hire representation to help her undo what's being done. Okay. And the court essentially says, you can't hire an attorney. You have been deemed incompetent. That's why you're being in a conservatorship.
And Adam Streisand, was he the first? She wasn't allowed to hire him, right? That was one attorney.
Correct.
And then John Erdley was the early one who kept trying to stop this, right?
Yes. Yeah. He famously, a letter that he had written Britney has actually just started to recirculate. But this is old news if you've been following the story. This letter's not new. But essentially, he calls exactly what's about to happen and does end up happening to Britney. Her kids being kind of used as tools to force her to comply. Like, if you don't do XYZ, you're not going to see your children. And because she's in a conservatorship, there's a whole custodial aspect to this where it's like, you can't legally have custody of your children if you can't take care of yourself. So she's granted visitation, but she has no like real legal say in terms of what school what school her kids go to, or just any of that. So it was just this whole cascading thing that happened to her so fast. As we can see, it's taking literally years to get out of. And so it's so mind blowing to me that you can be put into something against your will. She did not want to be in it. There's voicemails out there currently, her voice, where she's basically pleading with, and a potential attorney she wants to hire, John Ardley, to help her get out of this. She says that she fears her dad's going to threaten her with her kids, like just everything. So from day one, she didn't want to be in this. Day one, she's fighting against it. And for years and years and years, she's ignored and controlled. She said herself that she was forced to be given medication to essentially change who she is, so she would just submit. Everything that her team back then would allege against other people, oh, this person gave her drugs and this person's trying to control her. It turns out they were the ones doing that, just for legal purposes, allegedly. And I mean, it is what it is. Britney said it herself. So it just turned, and this is something that I obviously had no idea, me covering this. I didn't think that this would be a thing for this long. I was just speaking out about it initially because I'm like, how could this woman who I've like idolized, be in this? This doesn't make any sense. And there was nobody out there, for the most part. The media and the general public, I think, didn't know how to weigh in because it is so private and sensitive. It is someone's mental health and their well-being. And how do you comment on something that you don't have all the facts? So because I was young, I wasn't some sort of corporation, but I did have a big following even back then. It was like, I guess it's going to be me. I'm going to just be the one to speak out about this. It wasn't even that intentional. It was just like, I would see something and I'd be like, this is wrong. I would see him. And just over the years, just like example after example just would pop up. And I feel like I was never proven wrong, So
I just want to say, first off, neither of us are attorneys. So we're going to put that out there clearly.
Yes.
And secondly, I'm doing this not out of the game to jump on the exploitation train. Mm-hmm. This is done because I got passionate about the injustice of what's been done here to a human being who's an artist, who's still expected to be an artist, who still performs as an artist that everyone makes money on. And the injustice of it drove me nuts. So I realized I have to somehow have a conversation about this and not about treating this with anything with exploitation. I mean, with the most sensitivity to her well-being. Anyway, I just want to add that.
Well, I love that you say that because I can relate to that. One of the harshest criticisms that I take to heart out of all of the stuff that people say is that I use Britney for personal gain. And that one hurts because it forces me to kind of realize like some part of that there's a little truth to that. If you want to look at it through kind of a negative lens, here I am doing another interview, doing a podcast, and I'm, and getting my quote unquote, getting my name out there. I get that, I struggle with that. I don't like that aspect. I try to look at it as well as like Britney's voice has been stripped from her for years. And I have been trying to have BreatheHeavy be kind of a place for, I guess it's a little weird to say for her to have a voice there, but at least to shine a light on this injustice, because everyone not speaking, because if everyone decides collectively, like, this is just private, we don't want to comment on this, then there would have been zero change for her. So it was the lesser of two evils to speak about this. And I struggle with it still to this day. I'm like still talking about Britney and Free Britney. And there's more people following BreatheHeavy now than ever. Am I throwing gasoline onto this fire? Am I helping her? So it's something I struggle with too. So I appreciate you recognizing that.
Yeah. And I mean, and you've studied now a little bit conservatorships. You kind of probably understand a little bit what's in the context of one. I mean, the fact here that she has no access to communicate with the outside world, how unusual is that in anyone's conservatorship for a conservatee to not have access to the outside world?
Well, one thing I think first we should probably like quickly touch on is like conservatorship is designed for someone who is just completely mentally incapacitated. So like, for example, you have a parent, they are 95 years old. They just are mentally, they're just not there anymore, but they're still alive and they have assets. So you as the son or daughter want to do what's best for them. You know, you want to help them. So you become their conservator so you can help them function in terms of like, where is their money going to go if they pass away, or while they're alive, what happens with their money? What about their house? Like you handle kind of both personal and financial decisions for them. So they're designed, they can be useful and they can be a source of good for people. In Britney's case, it's been a total loophole and they've just completely abused the situation. So to answer your question, how, you know, anyone who's listening, I'm sure your instant reaction is like, if anyone gets cut off from the outside world, that's called prison. That's what that is. They have essentially in some way kind of put her in this jail for simply having a past, for simply being famous and not knowing, having the emotional tools at that point as a 25-year-old to handle superstardom. How is anyone on earth going to be able to handle what she handled? So it's super unfair what they've done. She just posted a video, I think, 3 days ago from the time of this recording, where she says, I got an iPad. It's the first time I ever had an iPad. She's so excited. And it's like, on the one hand, I was genuinely happy for her. And then on the other hand, I was genuinely sad for her because I'm like, that's really upsetting that this multi-millionaire celebrity was not able to tap into her own financial resources to just buy an iPad. She has to get all these kinds of, things approved by her financial conservator, which, by the way, is her father, whom she claims is abusive towards her, and she wants to file charges against. So, and the iPad is interesting because it's like, that is a form of communication. So just the fact that someone can't openly communicate with people, that's just so unjust to me.
Right. And like, as of today, I mean, what is her access to her own children?
I mean, that's a good question. In terms of access, one thing I do respect is she does her best to not kind of pull her children into this swirling vortex that's going on right now. She used to be a lot more open about them, but I think in light of everything, she's kind of not included them on her Instagram. At the same time, there's a lot of speculation that she isn't allowed to see them as frequently as before, which is heartbreaking if that's really the case. In terms of the legal side of things, I just touched on this. As far as I know, she has zero custody. So she has visitation, but Kevin Federline, her ex, I believe, has 100% of the custodial rights. So I would imagine, I hope this doesn't happen, but I would imagine once the conservatorship dissolves, which I do believe it's on its way out, I fear there's going to be a bit of a custody thing then, because she's going to be like, look, the court says that I am competent and I can make these decisions and I want to be able to have, legal say in my own children's lives that it's been taken away from her for all these years. And her kids are teenagers now. So there's only kind of a few years left until they turn 18. So I just fear that there's going to be that ensues afterward. I hope not, but K-Fed, his livelihood depends in some way on Britney's situation. He, I believe, does not have a job. So he's making all of his money from Britney. So he's going to want it. I feel like it's in his best interest in some way that she stays in this situation. Her whole family's in that boat, which is the problem,
Right. So I'm going to skip ahead.
Sure.
I mean, look, it's a tragedy, a travesty that we're talking about this in years of, in like a decade. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to act as though, let's just talk about the current situation because now we got some action going, versus what she's been through for 10 years prior or whatever, 13 years prior. So she had a kind of an ineffectual attorney named Samuel Ingham. Is that who represented her on her side of the?
Yes.
And he was her attorney for about 13 years. Yes.
Yes. Court appointed. So just want to make that super clear to everyone that she did not hire this person. And this person, in my opinion, did not go to bat for her.
Right. So now here comes the cavalry. Matthew Rosengart is her new attorney, who is a former U.S. attorney in the Department of Justice in the Clinton administration. So he's a real attorney. And have you noticed the change in the procedures since he's been kind of brought into the picture?
100%. So like I mentioned, how Sam Ingham is the court-appointed attorney, Matthew Rosengart is Britney's choosing. Britney chose him. So that's a very important thing to clarify because Britney has not had a lot of say in anything. She's been denied having a say. She's been denied having her own lawyer. So the fact that this was even need to have been approved in the first place, a conservatee should be allowed to be able to hire an attorney of their choosing, period. The court should never say, well, you're not competent. You can't make that decision. So it's important just to double down on that. In terms of the procedure, yes, there's someone stepping up for Britney because her family, in my opinion, just hasn't. And in terms of seeing progress, there was a court hearing that the judge wanted for December. And this is par for the course. They make these court hearings. So right now it's August. When this court hearing was decided, I believe it was the end of July. So the judge is like, yes, 5 months from now, we'll reconvene. Well, when there's something on the conservatorship side that needs to be addressed, they'll do a meeting within a week. So when Britney wants something, it's 5 months goes by. Keep in mind, all these people are getting paid throughout these 5 months. So it's in their best interest to extend this as long as possible. Rosengart said, no, we're going to need to move this up to September. Okay, the judge shockingly agreed to that. He's come back as of this week and says, look, we need this to be moved actually to August because every day that passes that Jamie Spears, Britney's father, is in power is a detriment to Britney's mental health. He says that she has trouble sleeping. She's traumatized. So every day that passes where he still has a say is hurting her. So we need to get this court date moved up even sooner. That to me is huge because it's and he said multiple times, Jamie Spears needs to step down or he's going to pursue getting him forcibly removed. And in my opinion, it's going to happen. It's the whole world is watching. Jamie Spears, even as of this week, is still hanging on for dear life, just making all kinds of different claims and fighting with Britney's personal conservator, a woman named Jody Montgomery. They're all pointing fingers. Meanwhile, they're all making money during this. So
that was the part I found interesting yesterday, right? Because they kind of basically pointed guns at each other, Jamie and Jody.
Yes.
And now Jody has an attorney representing her.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Anyway, but Jamie Spears did have the audacity yesterday to say that his daughter's mentally sick.
Yeah, this is the narrative that's been going on for this entire time, and what they've done is in my opinion, look, I'm no doctor, okay, but from a bird's eye view, I can imagine your father, maybe her entire family. I'm not sure the dynamic of all of them, but if you're being told you're crazy, you're sick, you're whatever they want to say, and then you're having this infrastructure set up around you to keep everyone at bay, to cut off your communication, that's going to affect you mentally. And maybe it starts to you start to question yourself, well, maybe I am, maybe I do need these kinds of safeguards in place. Maybe I am this way. That's one of the most insidious things I think about this whole situation, is to kind of gaslight somebody and make them feel a certain way when they're really not that way. So I think Britney cutting communication off from her father has been able to give her some of that distance to be look, they want to try to paint me to be however I want. It doesn't mean that I am this way. And I'm not saying that Britney doesn't have any sort of, things that she struggles with. Everyone has things that they struggle with. And even if she, has whatever her team of medical doctors say she has, that still doesn't equal lose your rights in perpetuity.
Right.
It just doesn't.
Well, let me ask you about that. Since I've been around artists who were completely self-destructive, ended up, basically killing themselves with addiction and such in the 90s, musicians, male. I can't help to see, this is my own humble conclusion, but I'm just seeing a ton of sexism in this whole thing, man. Because I haven't seen any of my guy artists who are just as wealthy as she is. No one was busting a move on them like this. I don't know. Am I crazy or?
No, you're definitely onto something. I mean, there's a reason why there's been an element of control in Britney's life, even way before the conservatorship. In 2001, she released a song called Overprotected that kind of like soundtracked the movie she did, Crossroads. But the lyrics, if you go back and listen to the song, reflect the situation she's currently in still. She's always been I think that's how her father views himself, is he's protecting Britney. And it's like, he can't even see how he's trying to destroy her. He thinks that that's his form of love. I think that's how he truly sees. I think he's totally blinded himself. He's not given himself. I don't think he has the emotional intelligence to be like, I'm doing something really horrible. Like, I just think he thinks I'm her father. I'm helping her. The whole world doesn't understand. They're not there. They haven't seen. And it's like, it's almost like a strength of everyone's to be able to not be so inside the bubble. So you can see, it's like, we don't know you, but like, based off of everything that's come out, including Britney's own testimony, this is a super, like, no pun intended, like, toxic situation. This whole thing needs to, the fact that it's still happening, the fact that it takes all of these motions and meetings to get her father legally out of the picture. I don't know what the probate court system is trying to prove. I don't know if they think this will maybe set a precedent for other conservatorships, or other people will say they want so-and-so out. I don't know what the deal is, but it's like, this should be looked at honestly as a very unique situation because of her stardom and her wealth. Most conservatees are not hyper famous. So this should be treated kind of as a one-off thing. Let this woman be free. Let this woman legally be free.
Right. But I think the narrative, as you just said earlier, with her father, is to put her so far down the rabbit hole that anyone in a conservative court system has seen how it ends for celebrities with any kind of mental health or drug issues. Usually it ends tragically. I think they don't want that blood on their hands, so to speak, figuratively speaking. So
no, I think that reasoning is why this was allowed to happen in the first place. It was like, well, we don't want, Britney to die like some of these other stars, so we're going to put this kind of safeguard in place. So looking back, it's like I mentioned, I do understand the need for some type of change. And fine, say we roll with this. Say conservatorship needed it first year, fine, whatever. Like, I don't personally agree, but let's just, for the sake of this, let's just say we needed it for a year. Why the hell was it extended to the point where it's made permanent after 1 year? That's where things get extremely problematic. Some of the things I was writing in year one was that if a conservatorship is going to need to be in place, then it needs to be with someone who's independent and there's not a financial and personal gain. There's not an incentive for this person to be doing this job. And it's a huge conflict of interest for her father to be in this role. How about you step down? He's had a lot of health troubles in the last year or two. Why not spend your last era, your last part of life, mending your relationship with your daughter? How about you focus on that? Get therapy, but it's like this mentality. I think he himself is kind of down some sort of rabbit hole, not Britney.
Right. And is his team dissembling? I mean, is Lou Taylor still part of it? Who's had some interesting allegations sent her way. And I see Larry Rudolph ran for the exits. So is this all starting to kind of crumble?
100% it's crumbling. Absolutely. The reason why Larry Rudolph resigned is because, in my opinion, Britney wants nothing to do with him. So there's that. And also, even though he denies playing any sort of type of role, there was control there. There just was. It was a collective effort. It wasn't a singular person. It was like we all collectively agree as a team, this is how it's going to go. And in terms of Lou Taylor, I mentioned some cease and desist earlier. I don't even know if I mentioned her name, but it was from her. And
I could have guessed that, but go ahead.
Yes, it was from her. And she wanted me to put out kind of some clarification via her lawyer. She says that she played no role in the inception of the conservatorship and amongst other denials that she sent my way. And this happened on 2 occasions. She sent me a cease and desist. And what's interesting about her denying having any sort of role in the conservatorship is she was physically there around Jamie Spears. She was at the hospital that Britney was, committed to in 2008. So to say you had no say in it, no role, in my opinion, is it's up for debate a little bit. And one thing with her that's kind of being looked at is that hundreds of millions of dollars of Britney's money appears to have been siphoned. Britney's net worth is estimated to be 60 million officially. Unofficially, people are around the figure of like 600 million. And there's a graph that I actually recently posted showing all of Lou Taylor's business companies and entities attached to her name. And it was like just the graph is mind blowing because of how many companies she's attached to. And not that I'm saying that this happened, but it could in theory be relatively easy to siphon a lot of money and launder money to a lot of different companies when you have that kind of wide reach. But I'm not saying that she did that. I'm just saying that it could look that way.
Right.
And so she's trying to distance herself as much as possible from the situation. But in my opinion, I think her name's going to come to light in a big way in the next year or so. And it's going to be hard for her to kind of hide from these things that I think she wants to sweep under the rug.
Right. All right. So you've read these tea leaves pretty correctly since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here comes the big question. How does it end? How does it end?
How does it end? I'd like for it to end, period. I'd like for, Free Britney has been a really important and in some way beautiful kind of thing in my life. I don't say it because I like Britney's situation by any means. But when I say that is because it's united like millions of people. That to me is just very special. And to have been a part of that is something that I'll always kind of hold dear to my heart moving forward. But I think it will end. I think Free Britney will come to an end. I look forward to that day. I look forward to the day we don't need this movement, the Free Britney movement. I do think that Britney will legally be out of these conservatorships, both personal and financial. I like to see her have some type of infrastructure around her where there's people that root for her autonomy and for her mental health and her mental well-being and her physical well-being. People who are like life coaches and physical trainers and people who want to see her succeed and aren't in it because she's Britney Spears and she's, makes a lot of money. It's like they've seen how she's charmed the world and they want to help her continue to do that. And personally, a little selfishly, I've always wanted to work for her. That I think that's how Breathe Heavy started subconsciously, is like I wanted to kind of see if I could try to get her attention in some way, to be like, I would be a great professional, even though I was only 14 or 15, like I've just always wanted to work for her. So I still want to, and I would like to think I'd be someone who'd be good for her in a professional sense, because not only am I a fan of her music and know what sounds good for her and a vibe that could be really resonate with a lot of fans, but I have, in my opinion, always tried to put her well-being first. And if there was ever a time where I had to question something, I would address it and I would face it head on and make sure that I treated her with respect. And so I'd like to just selfishly see that for me. But for her, I'd like for her to be rid of the situation legally. I'd like for her to do whatever she wants to do moving forward. So if that means she doesn't ever want to work again and I don't get to fulfill that dream of mine, so be it. I want her to feel fulfilled. And I think that sense of fulfillment will bring her happiness. And I think one thing that's fun to remind people is yes, we're speaking about her humanity and her civil liberties right now because they're at stake. But there's a reason why we're all have been enchanted in one way or another. Even if you're a casual fan, even if you don't care about her music at all, you can understand on a basic human level what's going on is unjust. And I think so many other millions of people have fallen in love with Britney because she's this artist, because she's an entertainer, because she gives people that kind of escape that I mentioned I want Breathe Heavy to be for some. She gives that to millions more people every single day through her music. And I hope that she kind of rediscovers that part of herself in the future.
And that would be awesome. So we all root for that for an artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, I just find it fascinating your motives are questioned when you've kind of been at this for as long as you have. And I just find that there's all these other new sites, right, that have kind of a little cottage industry that's kind of cropped up in the last couple of years, or even around the most recent things. So I'm thinking, well, I don't know. That's kind of, I don't know, direct your fodder that way. Jordan's kind of been in this for the long haul.
Yeah.
So, but listen, thank you for doing this. Thank you for your overview and trying to guide us through this, which it's an injustice, clearly. And I just want you to stay safe and to protect your own mental well-being. And let's keep these people away from you, these ne'er-do-wells.
Yes. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for having me. I just want, just to touch on that briefly. Yes, there are some people out there that don't wish me well. And I get it. However, the overwhelming majority of feedback I get is love, positivity. I'm so grateful for that. That's what I hold on to. Honestly, it has people support, not just in the Britney realm, but just me as a person. Anyone who's at this point made it to this part of the podcast who's listening, like, I have so much love for you because you are just showing a general interest in me. And I know that these are just words, but I genuinely feel a lot of gratitude for that. And I hope that I can continue to do good in the world and just appreciate all the love and support.
That's awesome. I hope that that's the case. So I hope that all is the big tidal wave that overwhelms all the undertow. So
yes.
All right, my friend. Well, stay healthy. And I'm really grateful that you took time to kind of share this with me. I know how deeply and how detailed your observations of this situation have been for over a decade, 12 years, 13 years. So thank you, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, brother. Thanks. Thank you for listening. This show originates from the podcast capital, Austin, Texas. My producer is Sean O'Neill. Visit theradicalpod.com for updates and even some merchandise. Also, please subscribe at Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I also ask that you please share episodes with your friends so we can continue to grow our community. See you all again next Friday.